All right, so up next we have the Fight Networks John Pollock, one of our favorite Canadians, besides Wei, Brett, and Eric Hawani. Welcome back to the show, John. Really appreciate you coming on.
Wow, what an intro. I'm at least top 5. Thank you.
Yeah, there's lots to discuss. Let's talk about some of the fights over the weekend. He had Stipe Miocic defend his title for the second time, a record, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. People are wanting Cain Velasquez to fight Stipe next. Do you think that's the right matchup to go for, or do you want to see him fight someone else?
With Stipe, I think obviously the fight that I think is of most interest to people is the Cain Velasquez fight, and that just becomes more the status of Cain Velasquez and when he's ready to fight again. If he's not looking to come back until the fall, I mean, it may line up properly. It's not a division that is all that ripe with contenders, so your options come down to Cain Velasquez, or if Derek Lewis is able to beat Mark Hunt, or even Mark Hunt beating Derek Lewis. Those are kind of your options at this point, because I don't feel Francis Ngannou, I feel he does need one more fight before you throw him up against Stipe Miocic. So those are the candidates, and I think Cain Velasquez is the most interesting one of those that are available.
Yeah, no, I agree with Josh here. Now, I would say, the three contenders left in the division, I think, would be Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou, and Cain. I agree. We'll just see whoever emerges first. But there's a lot of talk of who is the greatest heavyweight of all time now. You got Stipe defending his title again, and I think he can either break the record or tie the record. I think break the record, right? On his next one.
Yeah.
And then if you look at his overall record, I mean, you can argue a case for him to be one of the greatest of all time. What do you make of that talk?
I think definitely. I think especially if he were to beat Cain Velasquez, then it becomes a really solid argument to make at this point. I mean, when you're comparing him and the names that you're going to compare when you're having that discussion, whether they be Fedor, whether it is, for some people, looking at Fabricio Verdum of what he was doing up until the Stipe loss. I think with Miocic, the murderer's row that he's gone through over the past year has definitely put him right into that discussion, and he is probably a title defense over Cain Velasquez away from being, I think, a really strong argument to make of the greatest heavyweight of all time, given who he has fought and the way in which he has defeated these opponents, stopping Verdum, stopping Overeem, and then the way in which he beat Junior Dos Santos. I mean, those three alone, to me, that's remarkable when you look at the UFC's heavyweight division over the past decade, and here is Stipe standing over top all these bodies.
It's kind of sad because you look at Cain, and a lot of people thought Cain would be that guy, but it's sad to see Cain because he hasn't fought in such a long time because of his health, because of his back. Do you think that Cain could even, win a title? And if he does win a title, do you think he, can defend it, regarding his injuries of his back?
I mean, to me, Cain Velasquez is always going to go down regardless of what the next couple of years are like for Cain Velasquez. I think we're always going to look at this time period and wonder what would a healthy Cain Velasquez have been like, because I feel all things being equal, this guy would have been the dominant heavyweight of our generation. I think he could have been very much so what John Jones was at light heavyweight, or still is at light heavyweight, and I think similar. John Jones, obviously very different issues, but the same. We'll look at this time period in hindsight of what could have been if he was more active. So with Cain, I think a healthy Cain Velasquez can absolutely beat Stipe Miocic, but that's such a big question mark that I think it's an intriguing fight to a lot of people, because going into the fight, you'll assume that Cain Velasquez is going to go in there as properly trained and healed as he can. But I feel that Cain Velasquez, no matter what he does in his career, there's always going to be that what if that is asked because of the time that he has lost because of injuries and the way in which he did prepare for these championship fights, and it took a big beating on his body to do so. Yeah,
I agree. Staying on the 211 talk, you have Joanna Jędrzejczyk defending her title. She looked amazing doing so. It's getting to that point where people are starting to talk that she's pretty much cleaned out her division. And talk of her moving up because they're doing that 125-pound division. So what do you make of this talk? Do you think she's cleaned out her division, and do you think she's it's time for her to move up?
I think that, for her own interest, I think she very much wants to, at minimum, tie the title defense record for Ronda Rousey, which she would tie with her next title defense. And I could see her sticking around for maybe one fight after that. The names, she really has cleaned this division out. There's the Rose Namajunas fight, and that's about it at this point when you're looking at possible challenges for her. Like, beyond Rose Namajunas, there's not a name that jumps out at you as someone that's going to emerge in this division, on top of the fact that I think a lot of the women you look at in that top 15 picture at 115 are going to be eyeing 125. Joanne Calderwood is certainly one of those women as well. Yeah. So with Jędrzejczyk, I think that inevitably flyweight is going to be her future, and I think at strawweight we're probably looking at one, if not two more fights, and then a year from now she starts to look at 125 and never looks at 115 again. Yeah.
Now, staying on women's mixed martial arts, the UFC kicked off their summer press conference for the upcoming fights, and July 29th they're going to be here in Anaheim, California, for John Jones and DC. Do you think a fight with Cyborg finally getting that 145 title shot will happen? And if so, and if it doesn't happen, do you think the UFC kind of goes away with that 145 division?
Yeah, I don't see them abandoning the weight class. I do feel that it's certainly got off to an awful start, just because this was not a division that there was a huge amount of demand for. It was largely built around one woman, and that one woman has yet to fight in this weight class in Cyborg. I think when you look at that July 29th card, I think there's a good likelihood that you're going to see a second title fight added to that, and it's going to be an interesting game at this point of looking at Chris Cyborg and an opponent. Jermaine Durandamy is kind of MIA at the moment. You also have this welterweight title picture now with Tyron Woodley, and he's ready to fight in July as well. And I could see him ending up on one of those July pay-per-view cards as well. So you do have a couple of options, but as we've seen, one of the biggest stories of this year has been trying to lock these champions into title defenses, that the matchmaking has become beyond problematic to get these fights into the cage because of so many outside factors. Chris Cyborg is at least someone that wants to fight. You do have someone very adamant in fighting her in Megan Anderson, and I think that they're going to petition hard for that fight at this point. But the 145-pound weight class, I don't sense being a division that is very much marketed around the championship. It's marketed around Chris Cyborg. That to me is the prize in this division, is fighting her, and she becomes the target more so than the championship. And that's unique for any weight class, but I feel that the champion is such an afterthought at this moment. She's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and Cyborg is the draw at this weight class.
Yeah. What did you make of the press conference for the summer kickoff tour? What did you make of that whole thing? Because it was, I think, one of the most entertaining ones for sure. There's a lot of, it seemed like genuine animosity between a lot of the matchups. What did you think?
Yeah, I think that these press conferences have been fantastic for a lot of these personalities, and that when you place a grudge fight in the middle, and this one you had Jones and Cormier as the focal point at the start of the press conference, and you could see the trickle-down effect that all these other personalities are on the stage, and for the most part, 80% of them are all trying to get attention on their own fights, and you just saw this. The end result was you had amplified the interest in Cormier and Jones, but you also had dynamite between Kevin Lee and Michael Chiesa, and that extended to a number of these fights. And I know a lot of people will be critical of this being such a big part of the sport, but it is a big part of the sport, and it has been forever. So I really don't think you can criticize this, because the end result was heightened interest in so many different fights over the next couple of months that I don't see how you can look at Friday as not being a positive for all of these fight cards coming up.
Yeah, definitely.
But do you see, like, I don't know, like I'll use Kevin Lee as an example. You know, a lot of people were saying that Kevin Lee was trying to be like Conor too much. And do you think that fans kind of see through that and kind of like see that as a front than his true character?
I don't think so. I feel that the large amount of your fan base that is not your diehard MMA audience that is watching every single fight of every single card, they're picking and choosing. And when they're picking and choosing, it's the fights that they are attached to through personalities like that. I think that the average person who has never watched a Kevin Lee fight ever is now aware of this individual. He used that spotlight on Friday for all it was worth, and there's no way you can say that did not amplify interest in that fight for the end of June. I mean, that was just a rank-and-file fight night card with a lightweight main event that no one really had any strong feelings towards, and that's totally different a week later. I think that main event, those two guys, in that one clip that will be replayed to death over the next 7 weeks, it has added so much interest to what was just a throwaway Sunday night fight card. So I think Kevin Lee did a great service to himself on Friday, and listen, everyone borrows from everybody. Conor McGregor borrows from people. That's no secret at all. It's all in how you come across. There's some people who fall flat on their face attempting that, and there's others who flourish. And I put Kevin Lee at the higher end of that spectrum. I think he came across very well on Friday, and you were engaged in this guy. And the most important was, did you want to see this fight at the end of that press conference? And I think most would say yes.
Yeah, I agree too. Now, going back to 211 real quick. You had the Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez fight ended in controversy. Herb Dean obviously making a strange ruling in terms of making it a no contest. I think Dustin Poirier is contesting that decision right now. Then you have Dana White saying that he talked to Lorenzo and that that UFC needs to get instant replay. Do you see that happening anytime soon? And I don't know. I'm not sure if you're aware of the hurdles that the UFC needs to take in order to get instant replay.
Oh yeah, it's a massive headache whenever you want to implement something like that. As logical as instant replay may be, I've heard the argument that if you were to introduce instant replay, it would slow down everything and that everything would be contested. I really don't feel that would be the case. I think that's an extreme concern that really wouldn't play itself out. The problem is you can't just snap your fingers if you're the UFC or if you're the Association of Boxing Commissions and say, hey, we want instant replay, everyone adopt it. As we can see, right from that very fight, the fact that Texas has not adopted the new rules, that is all you need to know in a nutshell of how problematic rule changes are within the sport, where you have to get all of these different commissions with different perspectives and different ideas on the same page so that this state will adopt these new rules and this state won't. And to get instant replay pushed through, you would need all of these commissions to be on board. So while I'm in favor of it, I don't see it being likely. I think some of the more progressive commissions will look at this and I think will take action. But that's going to be, to me, it's not going to be a sweeping change. And I think it's an overall look at just the way these commissions oversee mixed martial arts. It's left to the state to oversee so that when you want to make tweaks to the rules, it's a real chore, and no one's bound by any kind of federal oversight that they can be mandated to making these changes. So I'm not really on the optimistic side that kind of a change is going to come through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must be really frustrating to see that happen. Because I want to see some kind of like a union not a union, but like all the commissions be unified and in agreement. But do you think that ever happen anytime soon?
I don't. I just feel it's so bureaucratic the way all of these commissions operate and run, and you have ones that I think have the right agenda in place, and you have others that are very against change. They have their own reasoning for it, and it's like there's no there's no way to just sweep in change like that, and it's such a giant headache to try and deal with all these commissions that I just look at a different issue like the discussion of the elusive fighters union, and look how problematic that is when you hear so many fighters that will now speak publicly about all these different issues, and yet they can't all get on the same page. It's not all that different from these commissions, where there's very little incentive to make all of these big changes rather than go with the status quo, which is how they are comfortable operating.
Yeah. And Demian Maia had an amazing performance at 211, taking over, doing what he normally does, and people just can't seem to stop it yet. You have Jorge Masvidal doing his best, and I think had the best outing against Maia that maybe his last few opponents have had. But then you have Tyron Woodley coming out saying that he's not interested in that fight, that he's looking for the big money fights. And do you think there's a chance that Maia could sit and wait for whatever the UFC decides to do with Tyron Woodley, or the fact that because Tyron Woodley doesn't want to fight him?
Yeah, I mean, this goes to the problem that I was just mentioning of how difficult it is to get a lot of these champions enticed for certain fights, and it's the crossroads that many of these fighters are looking at this point. Yes, Demian Maia, from just the philosophy of you are running a sport and the championship should be defended against the most deserving contender, there's no argument to go against Demian Maia. But for Tyron Woodley, he is highly incentivized to go for the fight that is going to generate him the most money, and that's not Demian Maia. That is fishing for a fight with George St. Pierre, who all of a sudden now is not locked into any specific fight at the moment. That if you're Tyron Woodley, of course you want to go to the ends of the earth to try and secure that fight if George St. Pierre is not going to be fighting Michael Bisping. Conversely, trying to lure a Nick Diaz into returning to fight. I mean, these are the kind of fights that these fighters realize, hey, I can't fight forever. I need to make the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time before this window shuts on my career and set myself up for my post-fighting life. So I don't blame any fighter that's looking for the biggest marketable fights, and I think that's what Tyron Woodley is looking at right now, and I think it's hard to fault him. I think Tyron Woodley has a style that very much matches well against Demian Maia. I would favor Tyron Woodley in that fight. But if you're Tyron Woodley, you're looking for a fight that is going to generate the most money, and there's no comparison of what a Demian Maia fight is going to be against a George St. Pierre, against a Nick Diaz, or finding fights like that. So that's the problem. The UFC has to find a way to bridge that gap to get the fights into the cage that make the most sense for them.
Yeah, I mean, but on the flip side of that, it puts all these divisions on in limbo, like the middleweight division's in limbo right now, and the welterweight division and the lightweight division, because of the champions. They want to have these big fights, but you're right. Like, you can't fault a fighter wanting to make as much money as they can.
Now, just competing interests. Like, it's absolutely awful for the divisions. It's terrible for all of these contenders, because middleweight is the most glaring, where these contenders don't even want to be fighting, because what are we fighting for? Are we just running in place here? Like, will this fight get me any closer? No. So you get these divisions that are iced for the most part, and it creates a terrible mess. But you just have such conflicting interests here, where the UFC just needs to put together these big fights, but these fighters, you need to incentivize them beyond what they already have available to them. So that's the conflict that they are trying to navigate through right now.
Right. Not only like the Fight Network sends you, Wayne, and whoever to certain events or selected events. Now, are you guys going to be at the July 29th card for John Jones in DC?
No, we won't be down in Las Vegas for that card. So we will be covering it back here in Toronto.
No, it's going to be in LA, right? It's the LA card, the July 29th.
The July 29th card, or are you asking if we'll be there?
Yeah.
No, we won't be there for that. I don't know when the next card is that we'll be covering. I mean, we typically I mean, we don't cover every single monthly pay-per-view event, so it's usually just a case-by-case basis of what card we're going to put those resources in to cover. So typically we'll cover all the Canadian events, and then so maybe Edmonton in September would be the next one.
Oh, okay. Now I asked Wake Ting this question, but he didn't have a definite answer. But maybe you know. Do you know why the WWE stopped letting their subscribers share their network? Because as I told Wade last week, I gave my login info to New York Rick and Megan Anderson, and now they're both kind of screwed out of it now.
So how was it before? Because I wasn't even familiar. Like how many people could log in at once to your one login?
Well, like it was me, it was Josh, it was my nephews. I had New York Rick on there, I had Megan Anderson, but it was okay for about almost a year, and then all of a sudden it just stopped it. Like last week or a couple weeks ago.
So now they've restricted it to its one login and that's it?
Yeah. Do you know any like do you know why that is or?
Well, I think the main reason is they want New York Rick and all of your nephews to buy the network themselves, and I think that's the most logical reason that they would be doing it. I mean, one thing with the WWE Network is that as much as you can look at the base numbers, and there's gradual growth from quarter to quarter, and they have their big jump come WrestleMania, but every single quarter, there is an amazing amount of people that unsubscribe from the WWE Network and maybe come back later. And granted, the WWE Network has enacted this free promotion, so, I mean, it does not take a genius to be able to get this network for free constantly, because you get these multiple month sign-up options where you can get the network for free. They really just want to bolster that number as high as possible. And so if you're someone that previously was sharing your login info with someone, that person who's shut out now is not going to have the most difficult time in just signing up for the network for free and getting this and just constantly trying to renew for free. That's, a lot of people use that trick, and it's something that the WWE Network is, I mean, they openly promote this fact of how easily you can get the network for free.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
You guys had your live show not too long ago. I think it was WrestleMania weekend, right?
Yeah.
Weekend. How did you feel about how it went and what you guys took from it?
It was great. I mean, we've done a number of these live shows over WrestleMania weekend, so we had a really great turnout. It was on the Sunday of WrestleMania, so it was cool to see so many people come out. And when you get to meet the listeners, that's always a lot of fun that I enjoy. So, yeah, it went really well. We had a great venue in Florida, and, I just had a really good time doing it, and hopefully we'll do it again next year.
And how many hugs did you get that weekend?
It was quite a few, actually, by the time the weekend was over. So I would definitely say double digits.
Oh, wow. Well, John, it was great talking to you, man. It was, I've been bugging you for months now about coming on, so really appreciate it. And kudos to you, because most people who end up on Ariel's post-fight show pretty much ignore us. So the fact that you're still talking to us is pretty nice. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, I hope I'm not too big time.
All right, John. I'll just list some of your shows. Review Away, Review Raw, Review a SmackDown.
Reviewing everything.
There's
plenty of shows. They're all at liveaudiowrestling.com. So do us a favor, check them out. I appreciate the support. And guys, it was great chatting with you.
All right, John. You take care, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, bye.